In this little part of the world where FIFA has come in and sent in a normalization committee to run the affairs of Trinidad and Tobago football, what does the wider world have to say about this? Here in the Caribbean, by extension Trinidad and Tobago, some have viewed it as a coup. Some say that FIFA was right to come in and take over Trinidad and Tobago football, that the debt is just way too much, stretching in between what we don't know, maybe some are saying $30 million, others are saying $50 million. What is the international perspective on this? Does the international community of football actually give a damn about this? I want to welcome to the show Philippe Auclair, who's from France Football. He's an investigative sports journalist for Josima magazine. He joins us via Skype this morning. Philippe, good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Appreciate it. What does the international community make of this FIFA takeover of this small Caribbean island of Trinidad and Tobago football?
Well, the first thing I would say is that, first of all, usually this type of story goes unnoticed. Something which happens in, I would say, a lesser footballing nation, if you excuse this expression, generally doesn't get much reported upon elsewhere, particularly in the countries where FIFA affairs and football affairs are reported the most. And I'm thinking particularly the English-speaking world, the Anglo-Saxon world, the UK, in Europe and in the US. But this has been a little bit different. I say a little bit different because what is happening with the normalization of the TTFA is not front-page news, but there has been coverage, and there has been more coverage than is usually the case, but that is due to the fact that it is a very, very unusual case indeed when it comes to FIFA and normalization, because of the speed with which the normalization process was initiated, and also because of the particulars of the affair, and the fact that, of course, it happens also at a moment when the presidency of Gianni Infantino is perhaps under question more than it has ever been since he was first elected.
When it comes to Trinidad and Tobago football and the takeover that has happened 3 months in, was that the right decision, or was that just FIFA wielding its muscles?
That is the big question, isn't it? It is unheard of. I think that's one thing we can all agree on, is that the normalization process is what is a nuclear bomb, basically. It's a means to take over a particular federation or confederation, which is allowed by the FIFA statuses, but which is it's not rare, but usually it takes far more than that for this process to be initiated. In this case, you have to remember that the administration of the TTFA was only put in place at the end of November, and that the normalization order happened 3.5 months afterwards, which is quite extraordinary and honestly unprecedented. And what is also adding to this is the fact that there are rumors and information circulating, and certainly contradictory information circulating, which seems to indicate that FIFA was looking at initiating this normalization process before it actually started on 17 March. So yes, it is very unusual indeed for this normalization process to start so little time after a new administration is put in place, and especially so little time after this administration had welcomed a fact-finding mission from FIFA and CONCACAF to explain the work it was trying to do to right the wrongs of the TTFA, because everybody knows that the financial affairs of the federation are in a really bad state. But yes, so it is, I wouldn't use the word suspicious. I will let people make up their own minds about that, but it's certainly very unusual.
FIFA today, this particular FIFA organization, this FIFA regime, how different is it, Philippe? You've been covering this for quite some time, for decades.
Yes.
How different is this FIFA regime, this Gianni Infantino regime, from that of Sepp Blatter that he successfully dethroned?
I think one of the main differences is the fact that it is now an organization which seems to answer to only one man, which was not necessarily the case with Sepp Blatter, regardless of his many faults. It seems to be that Gianni Infantino has a top-down way of managing the FIFA, which expresses himself, for example, in the fact that FIFA no longer has an independent ethics committee. which is one of the first decisions he took. And you get the feeling, rightly or wrongly, that almost every single decision taken by FIFA, which affects world football, is basically taken by Mr. Infantino, and that nobody really has a look into the matter. Take, for example, what happened with CAF when the African Confederation was basically taken over in August of last year. It was more or less a decision taken by Gianni Infantino and his advisors, and that was that. And so I would say that in many ways, despite the errors of the past, and heaven knows that they've been numerous, this FIFA of today strikes me and many other observers as being, in a way, less democratic than what it used to be, even under Sepp Blatter.
Wow, that is an extremely bold statement. What does the future hold for Gianni Infantino? Is it that, do you think, from covering this, do you think that the Trinidad and Tobago Football Association is going about it the right way in taking on FIFA? The matter is actually headed to the High Court of Trinidad and Tobago.
I think it's a very brave and somewhat risky choice, but it's a very brave choice. I don't think that they had really any other option offered to them, because, as you know, when they tried to bring the case to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, FIFA insisted on nominating and having 3 arbitrators, and also refused to advance the cost, which meant that the TTFA would have had to pay for the whole procedure, which of course they don't have the money for this because the bank accounts are frozen at the moment. So that was their last option in a way. It's a very brave one, but certainly what is one of the results of that is that this affair is certainly making headlines elsewhere. We at Yozima have been reporting upon it. It's been reported in many other countries. In Scandinavia, I saw recently a 2-page spread about the TTFA affairs. This would not have happened without the choices which had been made by the administration. So it's not easy to see whether it's going to have a positive conclusion as far as TTFA is concerned, or if FIFA will obtain a win in this particular case. But it has certainly helped to focus the attention of the football world, a little bit of it, on what is happening here, and beyond that, on the way that FIFA is functioning under Gianni Infantino. Because believe me, we could talk for a very long time about that, the normalization committees and the way they've been used by the Infantino administration over the last few years. Believe me, it's a subject which has agitated a number of minds for a few years now.
That's exactly my point, because this normalization committee way of doing things seems to be very popular with Gianni Infantino.
It is very popular. It was at the beginning when it was put in place.
Is that a dictatorship style of doing things, though?
It can sometimes be the only solution, and there is absolutely no doubt that Mr. Infantino's FIFA has at times used this process for good reasons. I mean, because there were absolutely no other ways to go about it. It was such a mess in some federations that, something had to be done. And for example, I will take an example of a country in which it hasn't been done yet. But for example, Kenya. Kenya is really in trouble. The football governance there is really well, I don't know which word to use, but it's not in a good state, shall we say. And the highest administration, legal administration in Kenya has literally asked FIFA to normalize the FA, so it can be done, and FIFA has so far refused. But it can be used in a positive way. The danger here is to have what has been described to me as a nuclear option. It was described to me by a former FIFA high-ranking official, by the way, as to use this nuclear option when sometimes it is not needed is something which needs to be questioned. There are other means for FIFA to put order in the affairs of some FAs which have got some problems, but it is the nuclear option. It is taking control, asserting control, making sure things are done the way that FIFA intends them to be done.
What do you think stands for the future of Trinidad and Tobago football? Can Trinidad and Tobago football be banned?
A very tough question, because it all hinges on what is going to happen at the High Court. I think that FIFA has got until 18 June, if I'm not mistaken, to present its case, after which the High Court will sit in session and decide whether the case put by Mr. Wallace and his administration is valid or not. And I think the debate is going to be mostly about the jurisprudence and about the jurisdiction of various courts, because I cannot see honestly how FIFA could challenge that order in any other fashion. I think that's what they're going to go for, saying that basically in FIFA statutes, the absolute authority of CAS as the only body, the Court of Arbitration for Sport, as the only body to which this kind of dispute can be taken, this is what they're going to insist on. Whereas TTFA, of course, is going to insist on the fact that it is a body which was set up by the government and with the government of Trinidad and Tobago. So it's going to be an interesting one for legal minds. Should TTFA win there, that would be very interesting, because I think then that they could go back to TAS or CAS and tell them, listen, our own High Court has found in favor. We basically couldn't pursue our case with you because we didn't have the cash. Now comes the time for you to use this possibility, this option that you have of allowing an individual or an organization which hasn't got money to have its case heard. You know, it is possible, it can be done. If, on the other hand, the High Court finds that the case is not one that it can hear and that FIFA is right, that would be the end of the affair. And what Trinidad and Tobago football then risk is suspension.
All right, Philippe Auclair, thank you very much for sharing an international perspective on this matter. TTFA versus the FIFA. We really appreciate